Good afternoon, and I apologize for my tardiness. We had a little bit of a glitch here. I'm Alex Katehakis, founder and clinical director of the Center for Healthy Sex here in Los Angeles, and welcome to our monthly webinar on Mirror of Intimacy. I want to encourage you to ask questions and share your thoughts and comments in the comments section on your right, usually. If you have to ask a question anonymously or prefer that, feel free to email your questions to charlie@centerforhealthysex.com. He's standing by and he'll get those messages to me anonymously. And during the first part of this webinar, I want you to think about the question, have I ever been seduced into a course of action by another? It could be a night of debauchery, it could have been an important decision in your life, or a sudden sexual encounter. And also to think about whether you've been the person who's been the seducer without consent. And we'll talk about seduction as a sort of quiet form of getting what you want at all costs sometimes. Anthony Powell says slowly but very deliberately, the brooding edifice of seduction, creaking and incongruous, came into being. And I think this is a very sort of seductive quote even, because seduction can be slow and deliberate. It can have this brooding, abstract facade to it. When we think of an edifice, we think of a structure, but it can also be an abstract structure as seduction. This notice of it being creaking and incongruous means that it's usually one-sided in what it wants, but it eventually comes into being because the seducer will stop at nothing to get what he or she wants. And with that, seduction can be a predatory proposition. Long before flesh touches flesh, the seducer can radiate with eroticism and desire or be very charming, and yet they're strategically encircling their intended object, which is their prey. And sometimes we don't even know what's happening because the person can be so seductive or so charming. But just like a spider that spins its web to catch its prey, the seducer can manipulate and use an imbalance of power to pursue the vulnerable dynamics that some find highly arousing. And seduction can occur when there's a power differential. And power differentials come in all sorts of form. They come when there's a difference in age, when there's a difference in money or financial power, difference in race, difference in gender, difference in any kind of power professional position a professional has, like any mental health professional, or doctor-patient relationship. So think about the ways in which this power differential can play out. And remember that the seducer is rarely concerned with consent. He or she just wants what they want when they want it. And what matters for them is getting what they want, and also the emotional high from the chase and from the conquest. Secret obsessions with power and validation, not the quest for reciprocation, often drive seduction, which makes it not just a selfish, but also a solitary game. And when people are preoccupied with obsession or validation from another, they're not really looking for or caring about what the other wants or what they need. They're just going after what they want and need. And that's what makes it solitary, sometimes very isolative, and certainly solitary, because it's a one-person show. And it doesn't matter whether the seducer is successful or failing, the non-consensual action always reaps a false harvest, because consent brings us two people's desires coming into fruition or coming into being, whereas non-consent, being seduced or manipulated, is really, there's a mistruth. There's not direct and honest communication there. Obsessed with the products of love and not the process, seduction yields a lonely caricature of intimacy. And when we think about those who seduce to get what they want, we think of people that are often rather avoidant or on their own in the world, or not really thinking about the gains of or the good of the whole. Again, they're just thinking about what they want, what they need. Seduce comes from the Latin seducere, if I'm saying that correctly, meaning to lead astray. Starting in the mid-1500s, we began to refer to the act of convincing a woman to surrender her chastity as seduction. And seduction then was a form of leading someone astray, because females certainly at that time were meant to maintain a certain amount of chastity, virginity, before they married. So you can see that this sort of predatory behavior came about in mankind quite early on, and maybe predated that, but this is what we have record of. And the very idea of seduction, of seizing or being seized, can seduce us into a state of anticipatory gratification, because for some, the idea of being seduced is as delicious as it is for the seducer of taking or leading astray what they want. So I also want to remind you, I know you're getting messages from Center for Healthy Sex, to please text me any of your thoughts or comments or questions as I go along here. And in the ideal realm of movies and television, sensual pursuit provides the perfect playground for our voyeurism and lust for intrigue. And so, as with all things, seduction can be a beautiful interplay between two people, a game of arousal that's agreed upon, where it is a little bit like a game of hide and seek between two psyches. Maybe not so much the literal hide and seek that children play, but when it isn't consensual and when someone is endeavoring to get something from you that maybe you don't want to give, pay close attention to how maybe you're being manipulated or used, or led astray or taken advantage of in ways that feel unsafe to you, and what are the ways in which you've let yourself fall prey. So this is a one-act play, it's a one-way street, but real life is not play acting. Seduction prizes the thrill of victory over the joy of giving and receiving affection. And seduction in a dyadic sense between two people really ultimately is about the joy of giving and receiving. It's the fun, it's the play of that. Whereas he or she who is out to get something they want for themselves is more prizing the thrill of victory. There's a malevolence in it sometimes. But there's no happy ending and no exchange of energies in that scenario, because seduction is a one-act play and it's a one-way street. So any thoughts or questions about that? I mean, surely somebody listening has had experiences where they feel like somebody has led them astray, or it's almost like a sleight of hand, like a magic trick, where you find yourself doing something you never really wanted to do. Seduction will always be a key ingredient in healthy erotic role-playing, as I've been saying, but as a primary means of meeting, knowing, and loving a partner, it falls short. There's something hollow in it. There's a sense of usury, a feeling of being abandoned from the get-go, that you're never quite going to get what you want, or you think you're being clever and that you're going to outsmart the seducer, that you're going to get something you want also. And you have to be very careful about that, because you'll lose if you're not really conversant at playing that game. And you have to ask yourself, is this really a game that you want to play? And instead of posturing as the world's most irresistible lover, we can take the greater but worthier risk of letting others see our humanity, our fallibility, and our innocence. And I think that's what happens when people start to play this game, is that they start to posture in a certain way, but they're not really authentic. They're not really vulnerable. They're not really letting us see their humanity. And we all can be guilty of this as well. So Robert asks a question saying, is there any place for seduction in an intimate relationship? And I would say absolutely. I think that that is what has us wanting to and desiring our partner, when there is that little bit of mystery, that little bit of seduction, and we're in agreement that we're going to play along with that seduction between each other. But I think the foundation for trust and love and vulnerability has to be there first. All of us have had awkward, fumbling moments of sex and sexuality, and times when we're incredibly nervous, when we've just admitted that to our partner. And there's something endearing about that, because we get to see the full spectrum of each other rather than this sort of artificial, this edifice again of seduction, where somebody's only cool and suave and debonair or perfect all the time. That really cannot be trusted, because there's not a fully dimensional human being under that. But when you have seen your partner, and there is a recognition and a trusting of vulnerability, then seduction can be quite fun. And these are things that two people can set up with each other, whether they're going on a dinner date on any given Saturday night, or a seduction that happens just in a conversation while you're together. There's a playfulness in seduction, I believe, that happens that precedes actually having sex or intercourse. So seduction is a form of foreplay. It's a form of outer course, if you will, where there's flirtation. There is a sort of captivating one's partner, where sometimes you can tell your partner that you're going on a date and not tell them where you're going, but tell them how they should dress and what they should bring. So if you're going to surprise them by taking them on a hike, you don't want them dressed, going to a fancy dinner. But you can set the stage so that you're making it a little bit like a treasure hunt or something along those lines. And the seduction is in the surrendering to the other, but it's consensual, and there's a sense of play, and you trust that that person's going to have your best interest at heart, even if the seduction is a little bit, much more racier than going on a hike, but it's something that you've agreed upon. So one of the things you can ask yourself or start to think about is, have you ever been seduced into a course of action by another? This was the first question I posed to you, whether it was a night of debauchery, an important life decision, or a sudden sexual encounter. And we have an email question that says, is there no role for seduction in dating? I'm single and I feel like I'm supposed to seduce women. Well, I think there is a role in dating, but how are we defining seduction? That was really my first question. We think of seduction as being sexual, that you have to be the one who makes the first move, or who starts to give signals and signs that you're available sexually or want the female sexually. And that dance is there, but you have to be careful to make sure you're really reading the cues from the other, that she indeed is giving you a green light. And rather than using your left brain just to think about that, I would suggest that you start to notice, what are you feeling in your body in the presence of this person? You might be really aroused, but if she's not making eye contact or giving you signs and signals, smile, laughter, maybe even, playing with her hair, bodily cues that are seductive, then you shouldn't make a seductive first move. And seduction can come in the form of opening a door for someone, paying attention to what she does or doesn't like. But the point is, you shouldn't be doing that because you want to get her into bed. You should be doing it as a form of play, as a form of amplifying the energy between the two of you. And actually, I think it's more powerful if you don't have sex with her or make a sexual move on her the first night, because you're building an erotic tension there. And then there's a desire to get together again and again and again. So seduction can be how you're dressed, your grooming, the fact that you care enough in how you present yourself, the things that you say, and the little gestures that you do can all be beautifully seductive and playful. So I hope that answers your question about what seduction means. Seduction can evoke many responses, from pleasure to horror, that often can coexist. So your best intentions might be read as a misfire, in which case you would do well to repair that and also ask the person about, if you felt like, or they felt like you were out of bounds, just sort of clean it up in an innocent way. And somebody's asking when seduction becomes manipulation. And as I said earlier, I think it becomes manipulation when it's a one-person system, when you're just going after what you want and you're not really reading the signs or the cues of the other person. So let's take this last example where the male feels like, he's going to seduce the female, and so he gets her really drunk. And there's laughter and flirtation, and she's loosening up, and really he just wants to have sex with her. And it appears consensual because she's going along the way, but you're not really that interested in her. You haven't gotten to know her. You've just used alcohol as a social lubricant when really your desire is to be sexual, and maybe you'll call her again and maybe you won't. That's when it's manipulation. Or when men can be very adept at, like creating this snow job where right out of the gates, it's a super expensive evening, restaurant, wining, dining, money. All of that can feel very heady and very seductive when, again, the end goal is opportunistic. It's not really wanting to know the other person. And so I would say that that's probably the best benchmark is, are you interested in the other person genuinely? Are the seductive things that you're doing, your intellect, your sense of humor, maybe what you're wearing, are they all part of the package of putting your best foot forward and being excited to get to know this person? Or are they all manipulations to get what you want when you want it and not really caring what the other person wants either? So the final daily healthy sex act here is that you want to affirm the sanctity of your well-being and integrity in that of others. And I think when anybody goes forth with that intention, that I am here because I want to get to know this person, and I want them to actually listen and get to know me too, is really the best way to start anything. Because look, face it, you can be seductive with a boss. You can be seductive or manipulative when you're trying to get a job that you really just don't want, but you need something right now. And so you're not thinking about the impact on the other person of what it takes for that person to hire you and put you in their system, because really you're just using them and you want the job and you're out of there anyway. That is not about your well-being ultimately, and a person is out of their integrity when they make a move like that. So be mindful, during the day today of your sense of seduction, of how you look at people, smile, what you say, and if you use it, even in the workplace, to get what you want, because you are not engaging in direct, honest communication. You're not walking up to someone and saying, hey, I'm a little bit behind on this project. Can you help me with it? I'd really appreciate it. Instead, you start to kind of get cutesy, or you ask them how their weekend was when really you don't care, or you bring them a cup of coffee. You're trying to ingratiate yourself into the person to get what you want and need, without considering that maybe they're overloaded in the work that they're doing, and that by asking directly, they have the dignity of their own process to be able to say, yes, I can help you, or no, I can't. And yes, I can help you, but I'm overloaded, is a way of recognizing that, wow, I want to reciprocate that down the road for this person because they're helping me out now. So I'm involved in my well-being, their well-being, my integrity is intact, theirs is intact, and it's just a much cleaner way to be in relationship with a person. And so here's a question here that says, how can people who feel that they're easily seduced avoiding getting caught up in that seduction? And I would say that's where internal boundaries come into play. And asking yourself, why are you so easily seduced? Why are you so easily gullible that you'll fall prey to somebody who's using you? Because that's a way of sort of going to sleep on yourself and not taking responsibility for your own actions. And what that does is it positions you incessantly as a victim. So you're always being taken advantage of, you're always being hurt, you don't understand what's happening to you because in some ways you're checked out on yourself. And so again, by listening, really listening to your body, when someone says, will you do this for me? To see what that feels like internally. Like, do you get a tightness in your chest, or do you feel sort of sick to your stomach, or is there kind of a weightiness in your body where you're thinking, oh, I really don't want to do that, and that you're afraid to say no because you don't want to hurt that person's feeling, or you feel obligated to take care of themselves, or obligated to take care of them. If that's the case, you really want to look at your codependence and why you accommodate other people to the detriment of yourself, to the detriment of your own well-being, your own integrity. Because what that will do is leave you resentful. As I said, it will leave you feeling like a victim all the time. And that's just not good for you. You'll then get into relationship with people that you resent. And you want to blame and shame them when really you're the person who's hurting yourself the most. And finally here, the question is there a way to integrate the sexy glow of seduction into your erotic play while still respecting the best interests of all involved? And I think that's a really good question. And the answer is, again, consent. Consent is always important no matter what you're doing, whether you're buying or selling, having sex, being seductive, playing around with somebody. You know, the worst thing you can do is start tickling somebody and not stopping when they say no, or tickling them when they clearly say, I'm ticklish, please don't touch me. That is not fun or seductive. It can start to be sadistic and even at its most extreme violent. So be mindful about your own seduction, your own desire to be seductive, your own desire to play in a certain field with another person, but be careful about where those boundaries are, because you'll give people mixed messages. You'll also hurt yourself if you're not really being stalwart about saying no when you mean no and yes when you mean yes. So are there any thoughts or questions about this matter of seduction and how it plays out? I mean, one of the questions we asked earlier, or I asked at the beginning, was this question of, have you ever been seduced into a course of action by another? And have you ever had a sudden sexual encounter you didn't want, or make a major life decision, or end up drinking more than you wanted to? And if so, why do you think you did that? And do you continue to do it, in which case you really have to start to get some help and look at your codependence? Or was it a one-shot deal, and was it even fun, and are you glad that you did it? And do you recognize the telltale signs of seduction, or are you seductive yourself in ways that maybe aren't as clean as they should be? So any thoughts or questions about that? Someone asked, how can people who feel that they're easily seduced avoid getting caught in seduction? Okay, so I think I answered that question. That's the same question. And this one is, isn't this framing of seduction sexist? It seems to think the worst of men. Well, I don't think it's meant to think the worst of men. It's about being wary of men. And mind you, women can be as seductive and as nefarious as men can be when they are out to get what they want as well. There have been many, many stories of women throughout history who have brought down kingdoms and brought down all sorts of people in power as a result of their being seductive sexually. So I'm not intending to think the worst of males or females. People can be quite seductive and quite manipulative and quite nefarious when they're out to get what they want solely for selfish purposes. So I think we should be careful, and for men especially, when you ask this question of, is it my obligation to be seductive of the female, I would say no, it's not. I think it's a co-process, a process of reading both people's cues, and it's important for men to be wary of women that maybe want to have sex too quickly. I've worked with many, many men over the years who've gotten females pregnant and they had no idea that was happening. Granted, they didn't use a condom, but they were told the woman was on the pill. Really, she just wanted to have a baby. That's one of the worst forms of manipulation and seduction. So let's be careful across the board with all genders and all sexual orientation when it comes to this matter of seduction. So any other questions, thoughts about seduction? Let's not forget the beauty of seduction, the power of seduction, and how important seduction is in sexual consort. So if we are, or you are, or someone is in a relationship with someone that's an agreed upon consensual relationship where sex and sexuality is a normal part of the relationship, then being seductive can happen with simple eye contact. Be sort of meeting the other person and letting them know just simply through your eyes how much you desire them, how much you want them. There's a profound seduction in that. Whispering into a lover's ear can be vitally seductive because of the effect it has on the nervous system. A smile across a room, a glance is seductive. All of these things are cues of our desire for our partners, for being sexual, that heighten the erotic process from beginning to end. So sensuality is tied into seduction, and someone's asking a question if there's a difference between seduction and flirtation. I would say flirtation is a component of seduction. Seduction typically can involve the entire body, the way the body moves. As I said, eye contact. Flirtation can come in the form of all of those things or one thing at a time. You know, sometimes I'm aware that I will flirt with a bank teller or someone at a grocery store, and it's not a seductive flirtation. It's sort of a recognition of gratitude or a smile, or a momentary joke between the two. There's an aliveness to flirtation that doesn't necessarily signal that I want to be sexual with you. It's more a recognition that you're a beautiful human being, or we had this sweet moment together in the midst of this crazy day running around. So I don't think it is the same thing. I think flirtation is its own thing, but I do think it's a component of seduction. Just like sensuality is a component of seduction. So all of these things, love, flirtation, sensuality, physical expressions, all of those are components of seduction. And of course, seduction mainly takes place in the mind. And that's where it can start to tip into these manipulative endeavors as well, when people are using other people to get what they want and need. So any other thoughts on seduction, how to use it, when to be careful of it, how to play with it during your day, and so that you have a sense of vitality? You know, we can flirt with our partners via text on any given day, and those texts can be benign, they can be an inside joke, or they can be full-on sexual and erotic, in which case there is an invitation of seduction. So think about all the different fields and ways that you can play with your partner, that you can be seductive today, and take an action, try it today. Send a text to your lover and let them know that you're thinking of them, or where you would like to meet them, or one little thing you might have remembered about them about the weekend, or how you were driving down the street and you remembered some sexual experience you had together. All of that is seductive. All of that sets the stage and builds an erotic charge for the next time you have sex with each other. So a reminder, Mirror of Intimacy remains on Amazon in soft cover. If you ever have interest of sharing a review, we love hearing them, whether it's one sentence, one word, one paragraph. I very much appreciate you sending us your thoughts and well wishes on the Amazon page. So unless there are other questions or comments, this wraps up our webinar on seduction. I appreciate you participating. I hope you go out into the world today and think about your seduction, your sensuality, your flirtation, and allow yourself to be vitally alive as part of the season changing. All right, take good care, and I look forward to seeing you in November.